Good evening. Oh my goodness. I hope that you had a fabulous day and that your month of January went well as well. I wanted to come on this evening just to give you a recap of my month in real estate. There have been some tremendous things going on in real estate. And I wanted to come on tonight to just talk to you about the value of a great real estate attorney. And this is so important because a lot of times we don't have the necessary information we need to make the right decisions about the professionals that we need on our team when you're going through the home buying or the home selling process. So, if you don't know, my name is Alexis Hart McDowell. I am a real estate and business attorney here in Chicago. I handle all types of residential purchases, sales, and investors as well, and developers. I also do business formations in all 50 states. So, those of you who are looking to start your real estate investing empire, reach out to me and I can get you set up. So, I wanted to just talk about three main things that have happened this month so far, all dealing with the value that I was able to bring to the person or the transaction. And that really helped my client not only save money, but make money in ways that they otherwise would not have. Now, there's a couple of different ways that a professional real estate attorney, or specifically I, bring value to a transaction, right? Um, at giving education, educating my clients is a value add. When you educate your clients, you're giving them knowledge, which takes away the fear of purchasing, the fear of selling, the fear of investing. So I firmly believe in educating my clients and giving that knowledge because knowledge is power, and knowledge kills the fear. Okay. Another way that I add value is that I empower them, right? When you know you have an experienced person on your team, on your side, who's got your back, you feel empowered to move forward, confidence, bold about what it is that you're stepping into, knowing that you are making the right decisions for you, okay, and your family. So I help empower my clients. And then one of the other most important ways that people find value from my services is, of course, the financial savings. I help bring them money or I help save them money. But in every instance, it helps their bottom line. Okay. Now, it's not always easy because some of these transactions have a lot of different people that have to deal with. But if there's savings to be found there, I'm going to find it. So I just want to recap with you three transactions that have occurred this month, that I feel as though best demonstrate to you if you're looking to get into real estate, buying, selling, or investing, that can empower you. Okay. So, number one, as I spoke about adding value, is the savings, right? I had a client this month who um, purchased a home. Okay. And, went under contract, let's just say for 300,000. Their appraisal came back at like 285, right? Um, so the seller was like, I don't care what the appraisal says. I want you to pay this 300. And so, my client reached out to me. She brought me on board late. She wasn't dealing with an attorney at all when this popped up, but she was smart enough to say, "Hey, something's not right here. Let me reach out." Okay, and at that point, I was like, "Look, there's different ways that you can handle this. When the appraisal is low, the lender, I'm sorry, the seller did not engage in any of those processes. So they came down. They originally wanted 15. Let's just say, by example, because I don't remember what the actual number was, but let's just say they wanted her to come out of pocket $15,000 additional, right, over the appraised value. Then they came down and said, okay, well, we'll split it in half. You can pay 7,500. Then I was like, no, there are situations that may be appropriate, but this is not one of them. So I had to draft this email laying out clearly all of the reasons why it is not acceptable for her to pay this additional money, right? And she was even like, okay, look, this is my dream house. This is a dream area. I'm willing to pay that instead of losing the house. And the value of a good real estate attorney is that we provide rational counsel, because purchasing a home can be a very emotional ordeal. It is typically the largest purchase that somebody will make in their entire life. Okay. And so you want to make sure you have rational counsel. And I said, look, I understand that this is your dream house, this is an area, but it still does not mean you need to overpay for the house in this particular instance, right? I would give different advice if the situation and the facts were different in a different situation, okay? But this particular situation, you did not need to overpay. You're not going to lose the house. I've been doing this for long enough. I understand what games they are playing. I understand the road that they're taking. Give me an opportunity to send an email. That's all I did. I drafted the email, made all of the arguments, sent the email off. They came back and said, okay, we're going to go with the appraised value. So that one email, understanding the process and the value of what was going on here in my experience, saved my client, let's just say $5,000, right? Because if they came split it in half and then wanted her to pay the difference, then 5,000, right? I forgot what I used in my example, 7,500, whatever it was they wanted her to pay, she didn't have to pay it, and it was thousands of dollars. Okay, so and that was literally off of one email. So the value that an experienced real estate attorney brings will save you money in the long run. Okay, and that just goes to another point that I want to make is the need to have a real estate attorney on your deal. People go into real estate transactions thinking that they don't need an attorney until they need one, right? But the reality is you don't actually know throughout the process where they're getting over, right? You don't know where to look for where they're hiding money or putting money. You don't know what legal arguments to make. They may be telling you something, and we may know right off the bat that that's against the law, right? But because you don't have an attorney on your team that is CC'd on every email or that they have to communicate directly with, then they're going to just tell you anything. And the truth of the matter is, if you're not experienced in this area, you don't know whether what they're saying is truthful or not. It's not their job to look out for your best interests. It's not. You're not paying them to look out for your best interests. You're not paying them to be your advocate. You're not paying them to give you legal advice, right? You're not paying them for that. So I don't care what the sales pitch is or how much, oh, it's going to be straightforward, this, that, and the other. None of what I just said is their job. You're not paying them to do any of that. So you pay a real estate attorney from the beginning to help you through that process and make sure everything is on the up and up. So it worked out well for my friend. She did enter into the transaction without a real estate attorney. I did close it out for her, no issue. She was very happy, and I was very excited that she called me, and quite frankly, overly passionate, because I hate when they try to do this to people in my community, right? Where they try these tricks on in communities of color. Okay, but like I said, one email saved her at least $5,000. She got the house. She is very happy, and that is just one example of the value that an experienced real estate attorney will bring to your team. Okay, um, the next one is kind of is interesting, right? This one was a deal that did not close. It was a almost $8 million defeasance sale. Okay, $8 million defeasance sale. All right, I can do a whole nother live on defeasance later. Okay, um, with that type of purchase price, the um, the buyer has to put down a greater amount of earnest money. Okay, so this particular buyer had down. We started off with 35,000, and then after a certain time period, they had to put down another 15,000, which was $50,000 in earnest money. Okay. Now, just really high level, when you go into a defeasance sale, you have to. There's several attorneys and entities that are employed in a defeasance sale, because there's just a lot of legal things that have to be carried out with that. Okay. I'm just one attorney that's in a defeasance sale. The bank who holds the loan has their own attorneys in another defeasance sale. You have to have a defeasance consultant that you're paying. All of this stuff, that costs that the seller would incur. Okay. Now, typically, um, if the deal did not go through, the buyer can make a play for their earnest money back, right? But in this instance, we said no. You do all of your due diligence up front. When you're ready to move forward, you let us know. Your earnest money is going to be made hard, which means the buyer is now obligated to close this transaction, or the earnest goes to the seller. Now, that's quite different than a residential transaction, because if they don't get a mortgage, then typically they are allowed to get their earnest money back unless other agreements have been made. Okay. Now, typically, even if that happens, buyers still put up a fight. I know I do as a buyer's attorney, will still put up a fight for the earnest money. Okay. So what I had to do to ensure that my client was compensated for all of these fees, it had my fee. Um, we had the bank's attorney's fees. He was paying the defeasance consultant. He had all of these fees, right? We had to make that earnest money hard and make sure that the buyer could not make a play for it. So I had to draft a non-refundable earnest agreement that the buyer had to sign off on in advance, making that earnest money hard. And what that did was that ensured that the buyer was not going to make a play for his earnest money after the deal fell apart, possibly encumbering title and keeping my client from selling the property. His attorney was aware of that. The buyer signed off on that. And when the buyer couldn't come through, my client was entitled to the full $50,000 earnest money. Now, again, this particular buyer tried to come back and say, hey, I know I can do it. I can get this loan. We were like, sure, no problem. Put another $15,000 of earnest money up. So now we're at $65,000 of earnest money. Okay. Again, we said you're going to put this earnest money up, and it's going to be immediately non-refundable, because this is all time that my client's property is off the market. And remind you, this is an upwards of $8 million commercial property. Okay. The buyer said no problem. Attorney signed off that, this earnest is non-refundable, and they only get it back if the seller is at fault. My client was not going to be at fault because he had everything ready to close this property out, right? So again, the buyer could not meet the deadline to get his financing. And it's also a note here that the buyer entered the contract as cash. The buyer entered the contract as cash, showed proof of funds of having the cash to close out on an $8 million property, but he chose to go the financing route. And when he couldn't get the financing that he wanted, he then lost his earnest money. So the buyer lost $65,000, and I was able to secure $65,000 non-refundable earnest for my client, the seller of the property. So I say that to say that it is very important. It is very, very, very important that we have the right documents in place. Number one, have the right documents in place that secure what it is my client needs, right? I had the right non-refundable earnest money. They signed off. He knew, counsel was aware, all of that, so that my client would be compensated for all of the additional fees that he was going to incur if the buyer was unable to close on that property. So that was very important. So that was another one that happened this month. And the last one is something that just happened fairly recently, right? I had a potential client give me a call, and she was selling a property, but she wanted to do a 1031 exchange. And as you all know, I taught a class on 1031 exchange. So I know the ins and out about that. I literally my office with Chelsea just closed out another client, a client of ours, on their 1031 exchange, right? So we handled the sale of their property and then we handled the purchase of their new property, all under a 1031 exchange. So we've done this before. So I knew, I said, "Hey, are there any questions I can ask you?" And she was talking to another attorney too, because, that's something we recommend. You got to vet the attorneys, make sure that you're working well with them, making sure that they're working well with you. And she said, "Well, this other attorney couldn't answer my question." And I said, "Well, why don't you ask me? I'm happy to help you. I taught a class on 1031 exchange. I just closed a client out last week actually on 1031 exchange. What is your question?" And she had a very basic question about the time frame of finding the new property. And I told her, I said, "Oh, that's simply 45 days. You have to identify your replacement property within that time from the day after closing of the sale of your current property." And she was like, "Oh, well, I asked the other attorney and he didn't have the answer. He said he didn't know." And I said, "Well, that's one of the fundamentals, one of the basics of the 1031 exchange." I said, "By the way, you have to have a qualified intermediary. Did you choose one?" She's like, "I don't know what that is." I said, "Well, the other attorney didn't mention that to you?" She's like, "No." I said, "Well, to even start a 1031 exchange, you need to have a qualified intermediary identified before the sale of this property, because the proceeds from the sale go to the qualified intermediary and they hold on to it for you." She said, "Oh, I didn't know that." I said, "Yeah, if you don't do that, you don't have a 1031 exchange." She said, "Oh my goodness." I said, "Exactly." I said, "So you let me know if you'd like to move forward with me. I am clearly well versed, I'm knowledgeable about this, and I can absolutely help you." And she said, "Okay, I'm going to go with you." So she let the other attorney know that she was going to move forward with someone else, right? That someone else being me. So I shared that story to say that another way that I add value is, again, by education. She did not know the time frame. The other attorney could not answer that question, and I added value by letting her know the very first step in the process, which was you need a qualified intermediary. So that really helped her. It helped build confidence in her that she was working with a real estate attorney that knew what they were talking about, that was going to guide her through the process, that was going to build her confidence and her knowledge in doing this type of transaction. So that is another way that I bring value to your real estate transaction if you're interested in a 1031 exchange. So when I say I deal with sellers, buyers, and investors, that's exactly what I mean. I can add value to each one of those transactions. As I just said, I gave value to my client, the buyer, by saving her $5,000. I brought value to this investor by letting her know how to set up how to set up her 1031 exchange with the qualified intermediary being needed first. And I'm even going to email her several contacts of qualified intermediaries so she can reach out and vet and choose one that she wants. Okay. And then I also brought value to my client who was a seller, where I made sure that he was able to get the $65,000 in earnest that the buyer put up when the buyer was unable to close the transaction within an appropriate time frame. So that is my experience, and that's just January. And I have been doing this for 20 years now. I am a real estate owner, I am a real estate investor. So this is my passion. I have a passion for real estate, and my purpose is to empower and to educate communities of color to help build wealth through real estate and entrepreneurship. So if I can help you do that, please reach out to me so that I can help guide you through the process of either selling property, purchasing property, or investing in property. Okay. I'm attorney Alexis Hart McDowell, also known as the Enterprise Esquire. You can book a consultation on my website at enterpriseesquire.com/calendar. And I look forward to being of service to you. So thank you and have a wonderful evening.